Other days, we are talking about the essential factors, 4 types of essential factors in Satipatthana meditation, and how each of these factors supports other factors to arise. The first, we should have an ardent effort. And when we have ardent effort, the mindfulness arises. When mindfulness arises, concentration develops. And when concentration develops, we can now see or discern the very true natures of objects correctly and clearly. So this Virya, Sati, Samadhi, and Sampajanya, Panya are the essential factors in Satipatthana practice. And today, I would like to talk about Chitta, mind. This Chitta mind is actually very difficult to see and very difficult to control, very difficult to know. The Buddha said that it is very hard to hold this mind, very difficult to hold this mind because it is very swift. It moves swiftly, very fast. And this mind, it wanders wherever it wants. It alights wherever it wants. So taming this type of mind brings sukha, bliss. The mind is very difficult to catch, very difficult to hold, because the mind does not have a body. For the body, it's easy to catch up, but the mind is different. Mind is very difficult to hold, and the mind is very fast. It travels very swiftly. It wanders everywhere. And if we cannot tame this type of mind, if we cannot control this type of mind, then we are going to suffer. Untamed mind makes us suffer. So therefore, the Buddha urged the beings to culture, to tame this untamed mind. And this mind is very difficult to see also. Sududdasang. It's very difficult to see because it is very subtle. So how can we tame this untamed mind? Through this Satipatthana practice. Through the Satipatthana Vipassana practice, we can tame the untamed mind so that this tamed mind brings bliss and happiness to us. Therefore, here we are doing Satipatthana Vipassana, and we are trying our best to observe the various types of objects arising in the present moment, bodily objects and mental objects. The other day we talked about the bodily objects, kaya. So today we are going to talk about mind, chitta. In Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha explained about this mind in 16 ways. The Buddha divided this mind in 16 ways. And every mind, whenever they occurred, we have to observe it as it is. We have to know it as it is. The first pair of mind is Saraga Chitta and Vitaraga Chitta. Mind with lust and mind without lust or raga. The mind related, the lust, lobha, greed related mind. Sa raga chitta. Whenever this raga mind occurs, we have to note it as it is. So raga, it is desire, lobha, greed, and desire. When we are practicing, when we are doing even sitting meditation or walking meditation, we might have many desires. We might have a desire for some beautiful sights. We might have a desire for some sweet sounds, fragrant smells, tasty food. And sometimes we have a desire for thoughts also. So whenever this type of desire occurs, we have to note it right away. So that is noting the mind with desire or lust. Then it will be a chittanupassana. Observing the mind again and again, observing the consciousness repeatedly, chittanupassana. But do we have to look? Do we have to find out purposely for this desire mind? Do we have to look for it? No, we don't need to look for it. Yeah. Because according to the principle of Vipassana, we try to observe the most obvious object. We try to note the most obvious object, most predominant object. So in mind and body, the bodily objects are more obvious than mental objects. Therefore, we try to focus on the bodily objects. And at the very beginning of the sitting, the rising and falling movement is very obvious than any other objects. Therefore, we focus on the main object, the rising and falling movement of the abdomen. And while we are observing these bodily objects, sometimes the mind wanders. It does not stay in the main object all the time. And once we notice that mind, then we note that wandering mind as a wandering. So how long should we have to note that wandering mind? It varies. Yeah, it varies because sometimes as soon as we notice the wandering mind, automatically the mind returns back to the object that we are noting before. We even don't have a chance to note that wandering mind because automatically, sometimes immediately, the mind returns back to the object that we are noting before. In that case, we don't need to note that wandering mind because the mind is already back to the first object that we are noting. But sometimes we have a time to note wandering mind. Yeah, we note wandering for one time and it disappeared, it stops. Sometimes noting for 2 times, the wandering stops. Sometimes 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, it stops. So when it stops, we don't need to note it again and again because there is no more wandering mind. Then we just we return back to the object that we are noting before. But sometimes the wandering occurs for a long time, although we are noting it wandering, but the mind continues to wander. In that case, what to do when it continues to wander? Yeah. My suggestion is note it for 4 or 5 times. And then you pay attention to the object that you are noting before. This is at the beginning of the practice. At the beginning of the practice, our noting mind or the observing mind is still very weak, not strong yet. So therefore, when we keep on noting wandering mind, wandering, we get lost in wandering mind. So therefore, at the beginning of the practice, noting this wandering mind for a few times like 4 or 5 times, and after that, return back to the object, the first object. But when your mindfulness and concentration becomes good, you keep on noting wandering mind as long as it wanders. And you come to see what happened to that wandering mind. The wandering mind stopped, disappeared. You come to see that. Yeah. So, but at the beginning, note it for a few times. But when you are very mindful, you can see with 1 or 2 noting, the wandering stops. Sometimes the mind automatically does return back to the first object that you are noting before wandering. So therefore, whatever, the wandering mind or thinking mind or imagination, whatever occurs, we note it for few times, 1 time, maybe 2 times, 3 times, 4 or 5 times. And then we come back to the bodily objects that we are noting before. That way we can keep our mindfulness continuous. We will not lose in the thoughts, in the wanderings. Yeah. Therefore, only if we notice this wandering mind, thinking mind, imagination, and so on, then we note it immediately. We don't need to find, we don't need to look for the wandering, and we don't need to wait. We should not wait whether the mind is wandering, whether the thinking mind is arising or not. Waiting that mind to wander or mind to think, that is not a correct way. Yeah. Sometimes some people just want to see the mind. Just want to see the mind. So they are waiting. What type of mind will occur now? What type of mind will occur? They are waiting for that. Although there are a lot of physical objects, predominant physical objects, they don't focus that. They want to know more about the mind. That's why sometimes they are waiting. What type of mind will occur now? So waiting the mind, the different various minds to occur, this waiting, we do not have a mindfulness there. While we are waiting different types of mind, occurring of different types of mind, at that time we might again thinking something else. And we are not aware of that. We are not aware of that. We say, I know I am waiting, but we don't know. Mindfulness is not there. So it means our noting, our observation is not continuous. There is a very big gap between the notings, big gap between the observation. So mindfulness is not continuous, then it is not easy to develop concentration. Therefore, the mental objects, whenever it becomes obvious, then we note, whenever we notice that, then we note it. Then we note it. if the mental objects are not very obvious, then we stay with the most obvious objects, the physical objects, maybe rising, falling of the abdomen, maybe other sensations in the body, whatever is obvious, we continue to observe that objects. Therefore, when there is a Saraga Chitta, the mind with desire or lust, then we observe it repeatedly. And that is Chittanupassana. We come to see what happened to that mind, whether it stopped, whether it disappeared, we come to know. And if we find it disappeared and no more raga is there, then we have to know that also. We have to note that also. Yeah. Another pair of mind is sadosa and vitadosa, that is the consciousness with anger and consciousness or the mind without anger. Mind with anger and the mind without anger. Means in the practice, sometimes we become angry for no reason. The anger arises for no reason. And sometimes we might encounter the unfavorable conditions, then the anger arises. Sometimes we become angry, sometimes we might have some ill will, we might have some dissatisfaction, and sometimes we might feel very sad also, sometimes disappointed, stressed. So whenever we found that anger is there, we are angry and we are dissatisfied with ourselves, with our practice, sometimes many reasons there. And sometimes we are disappointed because we want to gain something in the practice. We are trying our best, but still we could not get any, we feel that we didn't get anything in the practice. We did not progress in the practice and we feel disappointed. We become sad also. And sometimes we have a past memories. And because of that past memories, sometimes we feel sad also. If we have a very bad memories, then we feel sad. Sometimes the tear drops. So these are dosa, anger. Sadness is also dosa, anger. And aversion, hatred, also dosa, anger. Two types of anger. There are two types of anger. One is very active anger, and another one is passive anger. Sometimes we become very angry. Yeah, aversion is there. That is the active type of anger. Sometimes we are very sad. We are worried. We are not satisfied with something. And that is the disappointment. That is a passive type of anger. So when this type of anger arises, we should note it immediately once we notice it. If we do not realize that anger, if we do not notice that anger, we can't note, we can't observe it because we don't know, we don't realize it, we don't notice it. But once we notice it, then immediately we have to note it. Angry, 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 or anger, 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 and disappointed, disappointed, sad, sad, worry, worry, hatred, hatred. And when we note it repeatedly, we come to see how it disappeared. And when it disappeared, we just return back to the object that we are noting before. So noting this type of mind is also Chittanupassana. And we also come to know when the anger disappeared, we come to know, oh, the anger disappeared. There is no more. And noting that mind is also Chittanupassana. And another pair of mind is Samoha Chitta and Vitamoha Chitta. Samoha Chitta is the mind with delusion, moha, delusion or ignorance. And Vita moha is the mind without delusion. Deluded mind and not deluded mind. So moha, delusion, is actually, it associates with all types of unwholesome consciousness. When desire is there, delusion also there. Desire, delusion. When we are angry, when anger is there, delusion also there. So when delusion, moha is there, we will not see the things clearly. We will not see the things clearly, moha. But not seeing the things clearly is moha, but not only not seeing the things clearly is moha, but sometimes we see the things clearly, but still the mind is deluded. Although we see the things clearly, but it is said that the mind is still deluded. This delusion, moha, it associates with lobha mind, the mind with greed, the mind with hatred. And Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw said that the deluded mind can see clearly also. And some people are inventing weapons. And we said that, oh, they are very genius, huh? They are very brilliant. They have an idea, they have a knowledge that they can invent different types of weapons. But Sayadaw explained that it is not a knowledge, it is not a jnana, wisdom, that they can invent the different weapons. It is also a moha, a delusion. that they are inventing the weapons. So therefore, Sayadaw explained that although moha is delusion, we didn't see the things clearly, everything is very vague, but actually it's not like that. Sometimes, although delusion, moha is present, it can see the things clearly. Yeah, so different meanings. And when moha is present, moha is also ignorance. So when ignorance is there, then we don't see the very real natures, very true natures of the objects. So whenever moha is present, there is distraction. The mind is distracted. That's what we call, that is called uddhacca, distraction. The mind is scattered. When the mind is distracted, the mind is scattered, we cannot see the things clearly. We cannot see the very true nature of the object. And doubt, vicikitsa. When the mind is diluted, we might have a doubt also. So with this moha, the two types of consciousness associates with this moha delusion. One is the distracted mind, and next one is doubt, confusion. So when moha is present, we confused. We are confused. When moha is present, we are distracted. And the mind scattered. The mind is wavering here and there. The mind is wavering. So the mind won't stay in one object. When the distraction is there, the mind will not stay in one object. That means there is no concentration. The mind is not concentrated. Therefore, whenever this type of deluded mind occurs, we have to note it immediately. And when we note it very energetically and mindfully, we come to see that this mind, this deluded mind disappears. So noting again and again this deluded mind is a cittanupassana. Contemplating the mind repeatedly, observing the mind repeatedly, cittanupassana. So another set of consciousness is sankhita citta and vikhitta citta. That is contracted mind. Contracted mind, and another one, vikhitta citta, is also again distracted mind. Contracted mind is a lazy mind. Lazy mind. Yeah. Distracted mind, vikhitta citta. Distracted mind is restlessness. The mind is restless. So in the practice, sometimes our mind is contracted, means the mind is now slackened. the mind slackens, the mind is slack, we feel no energy at all. We feel very weak, no energy at all. The mind is not opened, not active, not alert, not blossom. It is contracted. So when the mind is contracted, we cannot note the objects. Sometimes the mind is so contracted that we cannot see anything. We cannot spread the mind in the objects. So that is Sankhitta Chitta. But sometimes the mind is distracted. There is restlessness. Especially when we are thinking about the past, the mind becomes distracted. We are recalling about the past memories. Maybe sometimes from the childhood to until now, we are recalling about that past memories. And that makes our mind distracted, restless. Because once we have that memory, sometimes we cannot stop. We just remembering, we are just recalling one after another our past memories. And the mind becomes restless. And sometimes not about our past childhood memories, but sometimes about our past experience in the practice. How was my practice before in the previous retreat? How I meditate? What type of objects I did note? How much effort I put? How much knowledge I gained? So we are recalling our past experiences while we are doing sitting meditation or sometimes in walking meditations. We are recalling that again and again. Actually, we are supposed to stay in the present. Yeah, in the meditation, we are supposed to stay in the present. We are supposed to note the presently arising objects. But sometimes we are just recalling our past experiences, our past retreats. So we lose our mindfulness in the present moment and the mind becomes restless. Therefore, whenever this type of restlessness arises, we have to note it immediately. Restlessness. We have to note it immediately. And we should pay more attention in the present. So to prevent the mind return back to the past, we should try to stay in the presently arising objects, especially the main object, the rising and falling movement of the abdomen. We should try our best. We should apply effort to note the main object so that the mind stay in the present. It will not go back to past, stay in the present. And even if the mind goes back to the past memory, we can notice it immediately. We will be able to notice it immediately. So once we notice, then we have to note that mind so that it will not recall the past memories for a long time. It will stop. And sometimes we might be thinking about the future. So after the retreat, I will do this and that. We might be planning for the future. Or we might be expecting some miracle in the practice. We are expecting something in the practice. So that makes also the mind distracted, the mind restless. Therefore, the Buddha said that don't go back to the past and don't go to the future. Don't think about the future. Stay in the present moment. Stay in the present moment. Just note what is happening right now, what objects are occurring right now. Just focus on that objects. Don't think about the past and don't think about the future. If we go back to past, if we think about future, the mind will be distracted and we could not focus on the present. So we will not gain anything. And sometimes because we want to gain some new experience in the practice, and we put too much effort. The effort is excessive. So when the effort is excessive, again, the mind can be distracted. Because when we put too much effort, the noting mind overshoots the object. The noting mind overshoots the object, so the mind could not see the nature of the object. And later on, we will not get what we want. So the mind again become restless. And when we could not practice properly, then our noting mind becomes lazy. So Sankhitta Chitta, the lazy mind, when we could not practice properly, when we could not note the objects, because the mind is lazy. So at that time, we have to note that lazy mind. And when we put an excessive effort, the mind become distracted, scattered, dispersed. Then we have to note that mind too. Immediately, we have to note that mind. So noting this type of contracted mind or distracted mind again and again is also Cittanupassana. Yeah. And another state of mind is jhana consciousness. So now we are not practicing jhana. So, but in Vipassana also we gain the jhana. But here jhana is a mundane jhana. So we are not practicing the jhana, so we don't need to talk about this. And another pair is mundane and supramundane consciousness. Mundane consciousness, just now we are talking about lobha, the mind with greed, hatred, delusion, and the mind without this greed, hatred, delusion. Those all are mundane consciousness. And supramundane consciousness is the path and fruition consciousness. And also another pair is concentrated mind and not concentrated mind. So not concentrated mind is a restless mind. So when we found that our mind is very concentrated in the objects, then we have to note that concentrated mind also. And if we found our mind is not concentrated, very restless, then we have to note that restless mind again. And another pair is liberated mind and not liberated mind. Liberated mind means liberated from the mental defilements. Not liberated means the mind associated with mental defilements. When we, in the practice, when we are able to note the presently arising objects, at that time our noting mind is very concurrent with that object of observation. At that moment, there is no mental defilements in the stream of consciousness. That means our mind is liberated, but momentarily. Our mind is liberated momentarily. As long as we can note, we can observe the presently arising objects with full effort and aiming, so that the noting mind becomes face to face with that object, the mindfulness, concentration, and knowledge develop, there is no chance for the mental defilements to enter. So our mind is liberated momentarily. And when we keep on practicing this way, we gain vipassana knowledge stage by stage, and we attain the path and fruition knowledge, realizing nibbana. And at that moment, our mind is liberated completely. So when we have that type of liberated mind, we have to note that liberated mind again and again, and that will be the cittanupassana. And that's how the Buddha has mentioned how to note this consciousness mind. So, but in the practice, we don't need to categorize our mind in that way. So in practical way, what's happening in our mind, we just label that way. If we found that our mind is wandering, we just label it as wandering immediately. If we found we are thinking something, we just note it as thinking. If we are imagining, then just label it as imagining. And that way we can see what we can know about the mind. But to stop or to prevent these wandering minds, thoughts, imaginations to occur, from occurring, we try to stay with the main object. And if there is any other secondary object, any other predominant secondary objects, we note them. So do not try to go back in the past. Do not think about the past. If you think and you notice that, note it immediately. Note it immediately. And one more thing I would like to remind you that whatever object you are observing, try to focus it. You have so many objects arising on you. You don't try just look from the distance, like you are watching movie, sitting on the sofa and you are watching movie. Don't do like that. You try to focus one object, not in casual way. Yeah. Try to put effort, try to focus. Not everything at one time, one object at a time. For example, you are on the top of the building and you are looking down. You see many people moving there, many cars going there, many people passing by. You can see. But if you really want to see someone, then you have to focus on that person. It is also like trying to find someone in the group picture. When you look the group picture in casual way, you see everybody in the picture. You think that you saw everyone in the picture, but you didn't see it clearly. So if you want to look someone specifically, then you have to focus on that person. You have to look very carefully, and once you find, then you have to focus on that person. Then you come to see that person very clearly. So sometimes what can happen that in doing sitting meditation, we think that, oh, I'm noting, oh, okay, rising, falling. Oh, there is pain. Oh, okay, pain. Oh, there is something piercing. Oh, yeah, piercing, I feel. Oh, there's something, some tension is there. Okay, I know that. So we think we know that. Yeah, what happened, we know, but we don't know in detail. We don't know clearly. We don't know in details. That's why we focus on one most prominent object. Of course, there are many objects occurring at the same time, many things happening, but we try to focus on one object. So if you are able to note one object clearly, you will be able to note other things, other objects also clearly. So try to focus on one object. But it doesn't mean that you always have to stay with that object. I don't mean that. The most dominant object, you try to stay. And you found there is another predominant object and your mind is already on that object, then you note that object repeatedly, again and again. So it becomes very clear to you. Otherwise, we think we know, but we don't know in details. We don't know clearly. So the mind is very difficult to see. Sometimes we don't know what is this mind doing in the whole sitting. Yeah, so we become restless very easily. In walking meditation also, try to focus on your leg movement all the time. You don't need to do anything, just focus on the leg movement. You might have many thoughts coming in. Just aware of it. You don't need to note. If you want to note, you have to stop all the time because the mind wanders quite often and you have to stop again and again. So just aware of it and keep on focusing the leg movement. Note it continuously. So you come to see that movement very clearly. You come to see the taste of that movements in your legs, the lifting, moving, placing. And you will find, you will experience that how quickly your mind is concentrated. So may you be able to practice in that way and you reach to the goal very quickly. That's all for today.